Minori, the Law. Lady Murasaki's health remained very poor after her serious illness, and she had suffered ever since from a vague, lingering malaise. It was not especially threatening, but all those months and years did not bode well, and by now she was so frail that Genji felt very anxious indeed. The thought of outliving her even briefly appalled him. She herself asked nothing more of this life and had no particular wish to stay, for she had no fond ties to detain her. At heart, she regretted only what he would suffer when the bond between them failed. She commissioned many holy services for her own good in her next life, and she often asked to become what she still wished to be, so that she could give the little time she had left entirely to her devotions. But he refused. Actually, he had convinced the same desire, and her yearning had fostered it until he would gladly have taken that path with her, except that he meant never to look back on this world once he had left it. And while he knew that he could trust their promise to share one lotus throne in the life to come, he understood that as long as they pursued their practice in this one, even at the same temple, they would live on different sides of the mountain and never see each other at all. Her peril and suffering were too painful, and leaving her would be so hard when the time came that these feelings then would only taint his refuge among the mountains and waters. She resented his refusal because it would obviously be too unkind and contrary of her to act on her own without his permission, but she also feared that she might owe it to her own burden of sins. She hesitated to dedicate the 1,000 copies of the Lotus Stura that she herself had made over the years. The event took place at Nijo, which she considered her home. She gave the 7 monks vestments proper to their ranks, all extremely beautiful in color and finish. The event was very grand in every way. She had never told him that it was to be so solemn, and so he had offered her no particular advice. The excellence of her judgment and even her knowledge of Buddhist things impressed him profoundly, and his only role was to look after quite ordinary matters of altar adornment and so on. The commander undertook to provide the musicians and dancers. The emperor, the heir apparents, the empresses, and the ladies of Rokujo contributed a wealth of scripture readings and altar offerings, and the whole court busied itself similarly until the result was astonishing abundance. When could she have managed to plan it all? It was as though she had made a holy vow venerable ages ago. The Lady of Falling Flowers went, and so did Akashi. It was the 10th of the 3rd month. No deep faith was needed then to be relieved of sin, for the blossoms were perfect, and the sky so mildly lovely that the land where they say Buddha dwells might have looked just the same. The voices of the great assembly resounded impressively, and she felt sad even in the silence that followed it, because lately anything at all could put her in a desolate mood. All night long ceaseless drums pleasantly accompanied the holy services. The growing light of early dawn revealed flowers in many colors peeping out from between banks of mist and still wholly beguiling, while 100 birds sang as sweetly as the flutes. Beauty and delight were at their peak when the rapid closing music of the warrior king rang out brilliantly, and the colors of the garments doffed then by all present turned the moment into an enchanting spectacle. Every prince or senior noble accomplished at music showed off all his skill. stirred many feelings in her to see everyone so pleased, so merry, high or low, because privately she knew how little time remained. Now she lay prostrate and in pain, perhaps because she had for once been up the day before. For years, she had wondered on every such occasion whether she would ever again see the faces and figures of those assembled, ever again enjoy their skill on flutes and strings. And she looked with emotion even on some who barely deserved notice. None of the ladies present at the summer or winter concerts and games, not without a sense of mutual rivalry, though they get on so well, would live forever. But it struck her vividly that she would go before them, alone, into the unknown, and the thought filled her with great sorrow. That summer, she felt increasingly faint in no more than the usual heat. She did not suffer in any particular or alarming way. She simply went on growing weaker and weaker. Nothing about her illness was distressing or demanding. To her women, it was darkness to imagine what would follow, and they looked on her with deep pity and regret. When her condition failed to improve, Her Majesty withdrew from the palace to Nijo. She managed to receive Her Majesty in the East Wing, where Her Majesty was to stay. The ceremony was the usual one, but she knew that she would never see it again, and that made it very moving. She carefully heeded each name announced by the gentleman in Her Majesty's escort. Many senior nobles had come to serve the Empress. Their rare meeting was the first for a long time, and they talked intently together. Then Genji came in. "I feel like a bird banished from the nest. I am useless. I might as well be off to bed," he said and went away again. His great pleasure at seeing her up was a fragile consolation. "You are to be lodged separately," she told Her Majesty, "and I apologize that you will have to come to me. You see, it simply is not possible for me to go to you." She stayed a little longer. The lady from Akashi then arrived, and they all quietly pursued their intimate conversation. Lady Murasaki had many things on her mind, but she never spoke wisely about when she would be gone. She confined herself to a few quiet remarks about the fleeting character of life, but the conviction in her voice conveyed her desolation better than any words. She saw the little princes and princesses too. "I wanted so much to know how each of you would turn out. Do you suppose that means something in me still wishes I had longer?" she said. There were tears in her eyes, and her face shone with extraordinary beauty. The third prince was the most attractive of the children, and when she felt a little better for a moment, she had him come and sit beside her. "Would you remember me if I were not here anymore?" she asked him while no one else was listening. "I would miss you very, very much. I love you, Grandma, much more than their majesties." I would be so unhappy without you." He rubbed the tears so sweetly from his eyes that she wept through her smiles. "You must live here when you grow up, and you must be sure to enjoy the red plum and cherry here in front of this wing when they are in bloom. You must offer their flowers to the Buddha too when those times come." He gazed at her face, nodded solemnly, then rose and went away just as he seemed about to cry. She had reared him and her princess herself, and she felt very, very sad that she would not see them anymore. She seemed to revive somewhat when autumn came at last, and the weather turned a little cooler, but even so, she was far from well. The autumn wind was not yet such as to pierce her through and through, but she spent many a day amid gathering dews. She was extremely thin, but her infinitely noble grace gained from precisely that wonderful new quality. Because where once the overflowing richness and brilliance of her looks had evoked the magnificence of worldly blossoms, her beauty now really was sublime, and her pensive air, for she knew her time was nearly over, was more sorrowful and more profoundly moving than anything in the world. At dusk, a dreary wind had just begun to blow, and she was leaning on an armrest, looking out into the garden when Genji came in. "You managed to stay up very nicely today," he said. "Her Majesty's visit seems to have done you so much good." With a pang, she saw how happy her little reprieve had made him, and she grieved to imagine him soon in despair. "Alas, not for long. Will you see what you do now? Any breath of wind may spill from a haggy frond, the last trembling drop of dew." It was true, her image fitted all too well. No dew could linger on such tossing fronds. The thought was unbearable, he answered while he gazed out into the garden. "When all life is dew, and at any touch may go, one drop, then next, how I pray that you and I may live nearly together." He wiped the tears from his eyes. Her Majesty added, "In this fleeting world, where no dewdrop can linger in the autumn wind, why imagine us to be unlike the bending grasses?" They made a perfect picture as they talked, one well worth seeing. But the moment could not last, as Genji well knew, though he wished it might endure 1,000 years. He mourned that nothing could detain someone destined to go. "Please leave me. I feel terribly ill. Oh, forgive me for being so rude, reduced though I may be." She drew her standing curtain closer and lay down, obviously in greater danger than ever before. "What is the matter?" Her Majesty took her hand and watched her, weeping. She really did look like a dewdrop that would vanish soon. Countless messengers clattered off to order more scripture readings. She had been like this before and still revived. And Genji, who suspected the spirit, spent the night ordering every measure against it, but in vain. She died with the coming of day.